Hello, everyone. Welcome. Just going to give it a few minutes just to let everybody kind of trickle in. Hope you are staying warm if you're in a cold place today. Actually, hope you're staying warm wherever you are. Um, and I think, yeah, so we'll just give it another moment. All right. Well, I think we can get started. I think the attendance is kind of leveling off. So, welcome to Succession Planning for Cultural Institutions. What's next? My name is Greg Stewart. I'm the Education Program Manager at the Conservation Center for Art and Historic Artifacts, or CCAHA, and I use he and they pronouns. For accessibility's sake, I will say I'm a white person with glasses and dark hair, and I'm wearing a checkered shirt and a cardigan, and my screen is blurred. So in this webinar, we'll both look back and think about the future of our collection stewardship succession planning initiative, a joint effort by the Conservation Center for Art and Historic Artifacts and Lyrasis, in which we develop tools and resources now gathered in our legacy binder to support better succession planning for for collections care and management roles at cultural institutions. After summarizing our findings in a white paper that we recently published, we want to look ahead to the future and see how to continue this work. This project was initiated amidst the many staff transitions that took place during the height of the COVID-19 pandemic. And today we find ourselves in a similar period of transition due to federal funding cuts. So how can we adapt our resources to the current landscape? So before we get to our presentation, just some Zoom housekeeping. You are in Zoom webinar, so your video and audio are turned off, but you can ask questions or make comments to us in the chat. Today's program is auto closed caption in English, and you can turn on subtitles with the little CC button in the Zoom toolbar. So we'll have presentations from our speakers followed by Q&A with you, but please feel free to ask questions anytime during the program. And thanks to everybody who submitted questions in advance. We're definitely going to try to get to as many of those as we can during the presentation. So this program is being recorded, and we'll send a recording as well as the PowerPoint and any other resources in a follow-up email. And I just want to thank the Institute for Museum and Library Services who make today's program and indeed this project possible. Sorry, let me just advance the slide here. So just a bit more about CCHA, the organization that I work for. And sorry, I'm having mouse issues. Just give me one second. Okay. So CCHA, we are a regional conservation lab and preservation services facility. We're based in Philadelphia, but we work with organizations and clients all across the country. Our conservators treat paper-based objects like books, photographs, documents, artwork on paper, and more. And our preservation services staff work in the field providing education programs and helping institutions plan for the future of their collections. The center also offers a wide range of digitization services, as well as fundraising assistance, housing, framing, and more. And you can learn more about what we do at our website, ccha.org. So a bit more about our speakers. I'm just going to go in alphabetical order today. So Tom Clareson is project director for the Performing Arts Readiness project, or PAR, funded by the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation to help performing arts organizations nationwide learn how to protect their assets, sustain operations, and be prepared for emergencies. He serves as senior consultant for digital and preservation services at Lyrasis, consulting and teaching nationally and institutionally on preservation, disaster preparedness, digitization, digital preservation, special collections and archives, and much more. Clareson serves as secretary on the board of directors for the Foundation for Advancement in Conservation. As Preservation Services Coordinator, Camilla Dawson is responsible for providing administrative support and project management for the Preservation Services Department. She handles the registration, promotion, and materials for CCAHA's workshops and education programs and assists in the expanse of capacity for preservation assessment work. She has additionally held front-facing roles at cultural institutions such as the Barnes Foundation, Philadelphia's Magic Gardens, and the Philadelphia Museum of Art. Camilla holds an MA in Cinema and Media Studies from the University of California, Los Angeles, and earned a BA in Film and Media Arts from Temple University. Michelle Eisenberg is Executive Director at CCAHA. She is responsible for executing CCAHA's strategic goals and business planning initiatives. She manages large-scale conservation and preservation projects with partner organizations, leading internal and external teams. She oversees our budget and works with the board of directors on business development. Prior to joining us, Michelle worked at Schultz and Williams, a consulting firm serving the nonprofit sector. And last but not least, our Director of Preservation Services, Deanne Feiga, works with libraries, archives, museums, and other cultural organizations to conduct need and risk assessments, assisting in disaster planning, and help develop policy and planning documents for collections. She also develops and presents education programs on preservation and conservation concerns. Before joining the staff of CCAHA in 2010 as preservation specialist, Deanne worked in the Brooklyn Museum, libraries, and archives. Deanne received her MS in Library and Information Science with a certificate in archives at Pratt Institute and her BM in Music Business from New York University. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Tom, who is going to be our first presenter today.
Okay, thank you, Greg. So my name is Tom Clareson. I am with Lyrasis and have just wrapped up the Performing Arts Readiness project, and I'll talk with you a little bit more about that as we go along. Um, I am a white male with brown hair, black glasses, and a green shirt and sweater. And my pronouns are he and him. I wanted to just take a moment or two to talk with you about how this project started and some of the research and other information that served as the background for where we were going. So CCAHA and Lyrasis, we work with museums, historic sites, archives, libraries, and arts organizations through the PAR project. And we created a suite of both research and resources focused on succession planning for collections care staff and arts administrators, because we saw during the pandemic a lot of staffing changes, a lot of other concerns in both of those communities. We've been offering educational programs, and you'll see information about all of those, including and up to today's, to present good practice strategies to prepare for staffing and volunteer transitions in arts admin and collections care. Our work completed in the project, the research work, includes listening sessions and a project survey. And a lot of the things that came out of those activities were what really drove us to create many of the tools that we did and a lot of the directions that we're going with our education. But another thing that helped us shape this project was a national advisory panel that has supported the project team throughout the project and includes a number of professionals from both the LAM, the Library, Archives, and Museum, and Arts World. And we have had, especially with the Legacy Binder, reviewer volunteers who have tested all of our resources and reviewed that binder. So I wanted to talk a bit about, in the next slide, our directions that we are going with the project. So we started in late 2022 and early 2023 and have just been wrapping up the project now. And this almost the whole first year we spent on listening sessions. In our grant, we said we'd do about five of them to for 60 people. We ended up doing 16 of them to almost 270 people. There was a lot of interest in this project. At the end of that, we did our survey, and we started in fall of 23 and winter of 24 resource development and testing. We have a website devoted to the project that started in 2024 and has just continued to grow and grow, especially our bibliography is always being added to. And since summer of 2024, we've been doing webinars and many conference presentations. And we have all those activities went on throughout that year and 2025. And at the end of 2025, we published our legacy binder, which Michelle will be talking about later, and the white paper on the overall project. So on the next slide, there were some key findings from the listening sessions that I always am interested in talking about because we were not surprised, but we were interested in all the directions people wanted to talk about this subject from. Very few of the participants in organizations that we talked with had experience with formal succession planning because they said, we don't have the time to do this. We're actually working on our day-to-day activity. It's difficult to do this kind of planning. They also said that succession planning was a low priority at many organizations, but for them, for the people who we talked to in the listening sessions, it was a higher priority. And they also said that they felt like the board wasn't concerned. So some of the tools you'll see are somewhat board directed. One of the things from the very beginning we heard was the need to recognize differences between standard and emergency succession planning. Standard succession planning might be from a retirement or from someone finding another job but giving plenty of notice. Emergency succession planning might be something where somebody gives 1 day notice, or it might be a situation where there is a long-term leave situation, or we worked with a couple of organizations where a founding director or others may have passed away and they needed to do succession planning. Documentation on succession planning is needed, but the other thing that people said was we need basic collection and operating policies. And one of the things I'll say, and one of the reasons it's been so great to work with CCAHA as a partner is that they have incredibly good basic collection and operating policies on their website for all sorts of preservation needs. So please take a look at those. One of the key things that we saw was the need to utilize a knowledge transfer process for employee work experiences, trying to use new technology and use other ways to transfer knowledge from one person's role to somebody who might come up and fill in at that role. And our next slide is just some other things that we saw from the listening sessions. There were reductions in workforces and volunteer groups due to early retirement and COVID. I worked with a music festival that had a 40% reduction between 1 year and the next in their volunteer numbers, and they actually had to call in reinforcements from another festival to help them with the volunteer roles and covering those. Part-time staff and volunteer staff retention has been a big concern, so strong communications with those groups is needed. Cultural and arts organizations focusing on DEIA issues, and an important aspect of those discussions is compensation and pay equity. That came up time and again in our discussions. One of the things at one of the very last listening sessions that came up and I thought was very interesting and something that we all can take to heart was the need for emotional support for staff at organizations where succession has taken place, particularly if you've had an executive director who has been in a role for 20, 30 years. There may be some need to really think about the transfer there. Maintaining relations with partner organizations and the community is important. This came up at the Association of Tribal Archives, Libraries, and Museums, and it's something that really a lot of the other groups echoed. And my last point before I pass things over is the idea of shifting succession planning from a finite task, something we have to do and check off a list, to a way of operating. And there are many benefits that have been seen when people are able to do that. So I am actually going to shift things over and pass the baton to Diani.
Hello, thanks for joining us. So my name is Diani Faiga. As Greg mentioned, I am the Director of Preservation Services at the Conservation Center for Art and Historic Artifacts. I use she and her pronouns, and I am a white woman with short-ish brown hair. I have brown glasses. Um, I'm wearing a lot of brown today, brown turtleneck and sweater, and I am in my office with some books and binders behind me. So I am going to be just spending a couple minutes talking about some of the resources that we have developed throughout this initiative, because the the purpose of all of these listening sessions and gathering information throughout the surveys, of course, is largely to help us determine how we can serve individuals better and how we can create resources and tools for them. So I'm just going to go through some a lot of links on the next few slides. So you will, for those of you who are registered for this, you will get a copy of the PowerPoint. If you are watching a recording later and you need to access any of the links, please just go ahead and email us. But yeah, so first off, we did a series of previous online presentations. They are all available. Thank you, Camilla. They are all available through our YouTube channel. So we did a session that was really just a much deeper dive into the research findings. We did a session that was a much deeper dive into the resources, going through and really explaining and highlighting all of the resources that were developed throughout this. And then perhaps most exciting, although I think those two previous ones were quite exciting as well, but we had a session in which we actually heard from some individuals in the field who had experienced various levels of kind of successes and challenges with succession planning, knowledge transfer, et cetera. So it's always really great to be able to contextualize these things and hear directly from someone who has experience. So definitely encourage you to check all of those out. Next slide. This is just a quick link to the website where we have most of the resources available. So we can go right to the next slide as well. Okay, so this is, as Greg mentioned at the top, kind of the culminating product that came out of this is a white paper that gives an overview of research findings, some proposed next steps within this white paper, which you can access at the link on the screen here, as well as the link that's in the chat. You can also get direct access to links to all of the other resources, which are listed out here on the right side of the screen. I'll get back to those in just a moment, but if we could go to the next slide. One of the resources that I think it was one of the last ones created, but it was, I think, with this and the legacy binder, one of the most kind of tangible and impactful resources is a roadmap throughout the process of succession planning and knowledge transfer. So it really breaks the process down into, if you could go to the next slide. Before, during, and after. And we have these kind of lovely, the folded up roadmap type graphics that really gives tips and some insight into handling some of these, making some of these processes less challenging and less onerous if you kind of break things up into chunks and work through it strategically and practically. Next slide, please. These are links to all of the other resources that we created. They're separated here from guides and written resources on the right, and on the left you'll see links to tools and templates that we developed. Each one of those on that left-hand link, you can actually download a blank, whether it's one of them is an Excel spreadsheet. There are some blank documents that you can fill in. And so you can actually utilize these throughout the process of succession planning and knowledge transfer. This is in here largely just to be able to have the links accessible, so we can go to the next slide, which is a little bit more visually appealing. So just to highlight some of the resources, we put together a couple of very quick guides, just the snapshot. A lot of folks, when we asked what they really need, a lot of folks said, well, really we need help and guidance on getting started. So how can we break down this process into manageable chunks and really just be able to dive right in? So we gave some ideas for that in the documents, the top 10 things you can do now to support succession planning and staff transitions, and also 5 key questions that board members should ask about staff succession planning. Because if you are at an organization that is governed by a board or a similar governing body, it's really critical that they are involved to some extent, or at least in sync with the process. We also put together a guide on conducting oral histories for succession planning, really taking advantage of that knowledge transfer concept. And so this guide here gives some recommended questions to incorporate into a kind of staff-to-staff oral history project. It gives even very practical details like recommended equipment and file storage, etc. Speaking of file storage, another really popular resource that we developed, one of Tom's Lyrasis colleagues actually developed and then adapted for this, a guide that's all around file naming strategies to aid in succession planning. So one sort of unexpected, kind of not necessarily the first thing that we would think of, but issue that it came up again and again. And I think we at the center have experienced this in our own experiences with individuals retiring, moving on to different roles, is leaving behind this kind of mountain of electronic files that are, if they're not organized in any way, shape, or form, it can be a huge hurdle and barrier to kind of picking up a job or a project where they left off. So you can get in on this a little earlier and be practical and strategic about being consistent in file naming and file storage. That can aid a lot in succession planning as well. The last thing that I will mention, and you can actually go on to the next slide because it's somewhat of a segue. Another document that was linked to a bit earlier is a document on essential written plans, policies, and procedures for collecting holding institutions. So another thing that came up is that in order for some of these processes to be less painful, it's really helpful to have the kind of institutional framework of consistent policies and plans in place. And that kind of trickles out not just to things that are very directly around succession planning, but around the way that we care for and manage our collections themselves. So having something like a collections management policy in place that is thorough, up to date, and comprehensive. If a collections person is not able to do their needed tasks tomorrow, having something like that in place would make it much easier for the person who kind of steps into that role to care for and manage collections. So that brings me to my last slide here, which is a couple of additional resources. No, you can go back, Greg. Sorry. A couple of additional resources that were not created as part of this project, but are completely relevant to it. And the Conservation Center also created a collections management policy toolkit, also with funding from the IMLS. And you can access that. It's just cmptoolkit.org. It's a quick guide and tool to actually build a collections management policy. Definitely recommend checking that out if you don't have one or yours is considerably out of date. And then finally, last but not least, as part of this project, we are also have been keeping and updating an ongoing bibliography. So we are not the only organization or individuals looking at these issues, and there are some other really fantastic resources out there. So definitely check out the bibliography, and we are trying to add to it as we find more things. If you have resources or tools that are linked elsewhere that you think we might really want to know about, definitely let us know and we will add those accordingly. So that's it on the kind of meat and potatoes of the resources developed throughout the project. And I am going to pass it along to my colleague, Michelle, who's going to tell you about the legacy binder, which in some ways kind of consolidates a lot of these concepts. So thanks.
Thanks, Tiani. As folks mentioned, I'm Michelle Eisenberg. I am a white woman with dark brown hair wearing a orange jacket, and my background is blurred today. The Legacy Binder is a tool that we created. We heard many times throughout our listening sessions that folks wanted to have, or some folks actually did have, a if I win the lottery binder, just a place where they were recording a lot of information that was useful to their colleagues if for some reason they were not there on a particular day. And so as Deani mentioned, the binder kind of assembles a lot of the resources that we have developed, but also we wanted something that would facilitate knowledge transfer of kind of insights and background knowledge that doesn't easily get captured in a template or a worksheet, something that would really kind of contextualize some of the other knowledge transfer. And so the Legacy Binder actually starts with a place to document kind of the goals of this knowledge transfer process, the rationale, and then kind of intentions for how you're going to implement and maintain documentation and knowledge transfer on an ongoing basis. We realized it was important to give individual employees a place to document things that were very specific to their role, their job, but also to create a way to make succession planning kind of an organizational practice, something where you could have colleagues providing input. And then the other thing that's very important about approaching succession planning as a process is that there are various opportunities for revelations, right? Where somebody's job duties as written don't necessarily match their job duties as they are performed on a daily basis. And so that's an opportunity to refine a job description. Or as you're going through and figuring out kind of who would be the next person in line for certain roles, if you realize that the designated person doesn't have certain training to perform the role. We wanted to create a tool that really illuminated those needs and allowed organizations to kind of make a plan to kind of fill in some of those holes in their succession planning. To facilitate regular updating of the binder, we have a spot where you can kind of highlight what you're changing at a particular time, so tracking the version of the binder. And then it's really kind of a tool that allows you to prioritize what pieces of it you're completing based on your needs. So, for example, I had a medical procedure that I was fairly nervous about, and so I felt compelled to fill out the sheets where I kind of recorded some important passwords in case, for whatever reason, there were a couple of days where people needed to access some of our systems. And so obviously, one of the things to do is to make sure that folks know where to find this binder, where to find this information, whether you're keeping it in hard copy or digitally. All right, that next slide. And so the first part of this binder, again, are very tools that are specific to a particular person's job role and really allow folks to pass on information about their jobs in the event of an unexpected absence or departure, really to give the voice of the individual to prioritize their insights, key reflections on different parts of their role. We have a tool schedule of priorities, so it's what's most urgent on your plate right now. Obviously, that's going to change over time. And so that's one of those worksheets that ideally will get updated as new things arise or as old projects are completed. Another important tool is a place to track daily, weekly, and monthly priorities. There are a lot of routine tasks that each of us perform that might be invisible to our colleagues and are the kind of thing that could completely fall through the cracks because we're just kind of doing them on a routine basis. So it's good to write those things down so somebody knows they need to be done. And then again, the idea with the job analysis worksheets and responsibility matrix are to really kind of make sure that everything is being covered. And it'll illuminate opportunities for job duty adjustments or cross-training in particular, where we feel that's an important outcome of a lot of these tools. And then the last two items on this list, really a checklist for when somebody comes into the role and when somebody leaves. What accounts in software need to be set up, what permissions need to be created, things like that. Next slide. Then the second section of the book kind of gives a little broader purview, looks at the person's role within the bigger context of the organization. And so are your policies full of organizational lingo and acronyms? Having a glossary where you can kind of define that insider speak can be a very useful tool. And again, the process of documenting can really reveal those gaps and lead to better contingency planning. You're talking about software, passwords, contacts, organizational contacts, resources and documents that are helpful to the person in the role, things like that. And then finally, the third section of the binder is an even bigger, broader background opportunity to look at organizational history. This could be done either in writing or through that oral history process, looking at the background of the organization and the department and the role in particular. And then the succession plan templates for, as Tom was mentioning, the kind of different scenarios, unplanned, planned, short and long term, really kind of the nuts and bolts of who would fill in which functions in different circumstances, and how to communicate, how to prepare, what training do people need, things like that. And then the risk matrix is a tool that we had developed, mainly to kind of define for your board what would be at stake if a position were vacant, as far as care of the collections or ability to service visitors, things like that. And in this tool, we kind of put this at the end. While we prepared the risk matrix earlier in the project, and it is something you can use to kind of uh, give a motivation for succession planning, we also realize it's the kind of tool that can be informed by context. And so all of the other information gathering and documentation in the earlier part of the binder will also kind of give you a different perspective on this risk matrix. So I think Camilla put the link for the binder there. It's a lot to absorb, but again, it's the sort of thing that it just makes it very handy to record a lot of these important pieces of information, but also prompts you to give that bigger context of intention and context within the organization. All right, and then I think Camilla is going to walk us through some of the questions that have come up from registrants.
Hi all, my name is Camilla Dawson. As Greg mentioned, I'm the Preservation Services Coordinator at CCAHA. I am a woman with black hair. I'm wearing a black and white sweater and my background is blurred. So thank you so much for submitting your questions through the form. We just wanted to touch on a couple of the questions that came through. So the first one is, how can small institutions adapt succession planning when facing sudden staff departures due to funding loss? This is something that's, I think, really been front of mind with things like government shutdowns, layoffs. So first, I wanted to highlight when we did our survey, we asked the question, have you worked in an organization or in a department that experienced problems arising from a lack of succession planning? You can see by this chart, 66% of respondents said that they had experienced issues coming from that lack of succession planning, which highlights, the importance of this process. This process can be really challenging when you have those sudden departures. So it's important to think about, what are these departures looking like at your organization? If there's time, are you able to have departing staff write down essential information? And are there any processes in place to support succession planning already? If so, you can rely on some of these processes as you're kind of figuring out where to go forward after these staff departures. It's also important in these times that you should start preparing your own materials that will assist in the case of your own departure, or if you get moved around in your department. You can spend just small increments of time working on these materials, in particular, the legacy binder that Michelle just highlighted. We recently had reviewers go through the legacy binder and fill it out on their own, and then speak with us about what that process was like. And I think all of us on this team were really surprised to find out that it took a lot less time than we expected for individuals to fill it out. Um, a lot of these individuals were doing it on their own as well. Some parts of it will rely on talking to other people in your department and leadership, but a good amount of it can be done on your own, in these small increments. So those are the things I would keep in mind when you're facing these sudden staff departures. Greg, if you don't mind going to the next slide for our next question. So how can small institutions maintain collections care and management continuity during sudden leadership gaps caused by federal funding loss? This one really gets more in depth into collections care specifics and collections management. So something important to start off with when you're facing these leadership gaps and these funding losses is determining essential processes and figuring out a schedule that can be divided up by your staff. Are there any processes that have come to a halt because of these leadership gaps? Are there any processes that cannot be currently carried out because of a lack of knowledge transfer, such as missing passwords, essential contacts outside of your organization, or any additional information that's crucial to this? It's really important to determine what of these processes have stopped and who can take over. As Michelle noted, there's templates to determine who can take over in the case of an emergency for some of these processes that you can outline at your organization. Has anyone in your department been trained on these processes? That's something really key to note. Are you able to bring in board members to help with additional labor and leadership in these times? One of the key documents that we've created for this project is making the case to your board. And that's something that you can talk about in case of emergency when you're making the case for how important succession planning can be at your organization. Um, Talking specifically about collections care and management projects, it's important to always be keeping track of these essential projects going on at your organization. These can be things like integrated pest management, things that really will, that your collection will really depend on in terms of preservation. Um, Figuring out who's in charge of these processes, determining a backup in case of that person's departure or absence. Because without these processes, the preservation of your collection can be affected by that. So going to the next slide and our last question. This was submitted to us by Majida. I hope I'm saying your name correctly. Um, in environments where there is no national strategy for educating and retaining new professionals in conservation and collections care, while experienced staff continue to leave, can succession planning be used as an advocacy tool? Specifically, can it help institutions argue for investment in education, training programs, and policy reform rather than remaining an internal managerial exercise? I thought this was a really important question because this is something that we've really tried to highlight over the course of this project how important advocacy can be and what tools can really make the case for that advocacy to leadership and board members. So I wanted to highlight two tools of the many resources that we've developed that can make this advocacy case. So the first one is the Succession Risk Advocacy Matrix. Michelle mentioned this briefly. This matrix really prompts the thinking about the impact of departures on key measures of concern: organizational mission, organizational revenue and expenses, and the time and effort of staff. This is something that you can fill out to show how departures would impact the organization on these levels. You can make the case to board members and to leadership about how not carrying out a succession plan in the moment can lead to a lot of losses in the long term. Another one that you can fill out specifically to your role is the job analysis template. This template supports succession planning by examining key job tasks, functions, connections, and expertise. You can fill out this template for your job role to show the key tasks that would be lost in the case of your departure. Additionally, this tool can help advocate for the additional training of staff in key tasks such as emergency duties. A lot of people said in our listening sessions and survey that because of staff departures, their role had really become muddled, adding on additional tasks that had not been outlined when they took the job on. So it can really show how your job function has grown with departures and make the case for, hiring additional staff, showing how many responsibilities might need a backup in this case. So these are two tools. There's also additional tools for making the case to your board and other ones in the legacy binder that can really show the importance of the succession planning process at your organization. So again, I recommend taking a look through all the resources that have been developed, especially the legacy binder and the roadmap, to really begin plotting out your succession planning journey, whether you're at the beginning of it or somewhere in the middle. These can be really helpful. So I think now we're going to open it up for additional questions that you can submit through the chat, and we'll be happy to answer anything else that you might be wondering about.
Yeah, thank you, everybody. That was really wonderful. Thank you for those questions, everybody that submitted. Yeah, if you have additional questions that have come up in the moment for any of us, now is your time to ask them. Okay, so I see a question coming in. Based on what you've presented, it seems that a big finding is that succession planning can't be reactionary. That is, once someone is already leaving, it's too late. How would you respond? I'm curious if anybody wants to take on the reactionary. I mean, sometimes it seems like it just has to be reactionary. I mean, in an ideal world, yes, but we've planned out and we've given you those tools, but I think there are still things you can do in the moment, right?
Absolutely. You may have to. Uh, of course, it's inevitable, but in some situations, things will be unexpected. And I think that's back to kind of what Tom was talking about earlier, is the recognizing the difference between planned and unplanned, either departures or shifts in responsibilities. So yeah, I think it can go certainly the situation could go more smoothly if more of the groundwork has been laid, but I can almost 100% guarantee that there will be something that's unexpected about any transition, even if it's a known transition. So you do what you can, you put whatever groundwork you can in place, and then you learn from your challenges. I mean, it's similar with emergency preparedness from kind of a collections perspective. Every time you go through an emergency or disaster, even if you have the most thorough, comprehensive emergency plan in place, chances are you will learn something from that experience that you can add to your plan and try to make things, at least around that one small area, a little bit more efficient, effective next time.
And I can jump in with a couple of comments here. And this ties in directly to what Gianni was saying about the similarity to emergency preparedness, which both of our organizations work with members and non-member organizations on all the time. One of the things that I always like to talk with people about is saying, okay, you might not have a policy now, but can you say that you'll try to get together a policy by, say, July 1st, and then from this day forward, quote unquote, we can use this policy? Because we know a couple of organizations just during the time that we have been working on this project during COVID, and then the time we've been working on this project, that have had two leadership changes. And they have said, well, the first one was awful, and it took us, 2 years to work through that. But once we were able to document things a little bit more, we were able to get through that second change a little bit more easily. So, yeah, I just reflect what Deani said and say, if you can set some plans in place to have something that you can move forward on in the future, that would be great.
If we're ready for our next question, we just have someone who's asking, you talk about the fees you charge for our services. I think I will say that so far, am I correct, everybody on this call, that we haven't charged since we've been funded by the IMLS for this program? I mean, we did have a course where we kind of went through the legacy binder that had, kind of course registration fee for a 3-week course. We have been talking a little bit about possibly doing a kind of fee-for-service workshop model where we could run through some tabletop exercises with organizations around succession planning. That's kind of still in the works, and actually a great thing to mention while we're talking about like what's next. That's a potential next step for us as we continue on past the IMLS portion of this. But I'm curious if other people have thoughts um, on this question about fees. But I think as much as possible, we're trying to keep this free or near free, these resources.
I think that one thing that I see is from the National Building Arts Center a question a little bit further down the way here. Is that course going to be offered again? I think all of these courses are available in recorded form. Is that correct? So that people can look through some of the webinars and things that we've gone through before. I don't know about the course where we worked with individual institutions, if that will be offered again.
Yes, I can confirm at least the webinars will be. I think we now I just want to make sure I'm answering this question right. So at a certain point, we had some of our course content available for CCAHA members. Is that still, this may be a question for Camilla.
Yeah, so the course materials aren't available as that was a course where we were kind of going through the resources themselves and having participants work on it in segments. It mainly relied on a lot of kind of live Q&A with people in the course and with outside speakers. I don't know if we're planning on doing that course again, but I will say a lot of it was going through materials that you'll now find in the legacy binder and completing them kind of in your own time and then discussing the takeaways from filling those materials out, what you've learned, kind of where you're noticing strengths and weaknesses within your own organization's succession planning process. So, yeah.
Thank you for that. Yeah, I do remember that a lot of that course in particular was kind of some, rightly so, people sharing kind of uh, potentially private information in a safe space, about their some particular features of their organization. So we wouldn't put that, we wouldn't make that public. Just going to our next question, a key takeaway seems to be that having collections care policies and other analogous documents are very helpful in preparing for succession planning. That connection is something that may not be widely understood. So, a good argument for having policies like this in place, sorry, I'm just scrolling down, is that they help with succession planning and knowledge transfer in addition to being useful for day-to-day issues. Yeah, thank you for that. That's a lovely observation.
And
Um,
I would just add that with a lot of this, it's the process as much as the ultimate final product. The kind of discoveries you make along the way, again, where those knowledge gaps are, where you maybe have way too much policy for something that's not even part of your collection anymore, or not enough for a brand new acquisition or something recent. So that kind of, I mean, with policies, it's good practice to update them with some frequency, just because circumstances change, personnel change. So again, thinking of it in terms of the journey as well as the destination is helpful.
um, yes, thank you. And our next question, have you assisted any organizations who are contemplating merging with another similar organization? Um, this is actually something that's very top of mind for us right now. I would be curious to just because I don't necessarily know that. Have we done that at CCHA or Tom? Have you um, specifically consulted on this kind of question?
We have actually at Lyrasis, and I'll say that at the end of 9 years of funding from the Mellon Foundation, the Performing Arts Readiness Project just merged with NCAPER, the National
Right.
Coalition on Arts Preparedness and Emergency Response. So merging is at the top of our mind, and I think it actually is a potential what's next thing for CCAHA and Lyrasis to work on together. We've been just starting some conversations about this because we've seen some of our member organizations looking at the need to potentially do this in the future. But I know that we've been talking with Michelle and Diani about this, and certainly I want to turn things over to have them look at this question as well.
Yes, absolutely. If you have kind of specific questions that are maybe more sensitive, then would be um, great for a public forum. I would definitely encourage you to reach out to us directly, Mark. A lot of it, it's there are two sides, right? Like in some ways, every closure, merger, et cetera, is completely different from the next and very particular to that specific organization. No two circumstances are going to be exactly the same. But on the other hand, recognizing that this is unfortunately kind of a trend for better or for worse. Sometimes it's a constructive decision. And so just trying to find ways to connect organizations that have had similar experiences. I think going back to what I was saying about the presentation with the case studies, I think hearing from folks who have been through it is of immense benefit for folks who are in the middle of it. So, that is one of the things that we're kind of scheming about currently is how can we kind of gather a bank of these case studies and be able to maybe connect up folks. At the very least, I think we would really like to develop a sort of resource bank and toolkit. I mean, in some ways similar to the legacy binder for organizations dealing with these very tough questions. But yeah, please stay tuned. Nothing that I can share about that's kind of on the calendar actively in the works, but definitely something that is very much, as Greg said, top of mind. So yeah, and please do reach out directly if you want to talk further.
Just a kind of a comment from Hannah. Thank you so much, Hannah. I simply want to say that it's incredibly helpful and thank you for sharing the information and these resources. Succession planning is currently an organization-wide endeavor and a priority for our department. Is it acceptable to share content links with my colleagues? Absolutely. Please share any of the information, all of the links that we've shared. And like I say, we'll have the recording and the PowerPoint available after this. So please share that even if folks weren't here for us live. Um, I'm getting a lot of great thank yous in the chat, so I think maybe it's a good time to start wrapping up, unless there's maybe one more burning question that must be asked. And if not, that is totally okay. We can end things here. We're just about at the hour anyways, but we're getting lots of thanks in the chat, so thank you everybody for coming. Big thanks to all our speakers. Thanks again to IMLS and to all of you for showing up today. And our next webinar will be Getting Started with Obsolete Media on February 17th at noon. We really hope to see you there. And when this program ends, a little survey is going to pop up. We'd kindly ask that you fill that out if you want to let us know how we're doing. So thank you, everybody, and hope you all have a great day.